Meet Ryan and Emily, a couple who, at first glance, seem to have everything figured out. Ryan works in IT, a field that offers him the flexibility to work from home most days. He's the calm, steady type, a man who prides himself on supporting Emily in her career. Emily, on the other hand, is ambitious and career-driven. She works at a mid-sized corporate firm, juggling tight deadlines, demanding clients, and the occasional late night at the office. Together, they've built a life based on mutual respect, love, and a shared commitment to each other's dreams. Their days followed a rhythm that worked well for both of them. Ryan would often start his mornings with coffee in hand, settling into his home office to tackle projects. Emily, meanwhile, would rush off to the office, always impeccably dressed, with a determination to conquer whatever challenges came her way. Evenings were their time, shared meals, conversations about their day, and a bond that seemed unshakable. But things started to change when Emily's company underwent a major shakeup. A new manager, Mr. Stark, was brought in to increase efficiency. From the beginning, his reputation as a micromanager preceded him. Emily would come home venting about how Stark would scrutinize every detail of their work, pile on additional responsibilities, and schedule endless meetings that drained morale. Ryan listened attentively, offering his unwavering support. "It's just an adjustment period," he reassured her one evening over dinner. "These things take time to settle." Emily nodded, but the weariness in her eyes told a different story. The long hours became longer, the deadlines tighter, and the atmosphere at her workplace turned increasingly toxic. Even Emily's close friend, Ava, usually the beacon of optimism, started talking about quitting. As weeks turned into months, Ryan noticed subtle changes in Emily. She spoke less about her day, brushing off his questions with short, vague answers. "It was fine," she'd say, barely looking up from her phone. Her usual enthusiasm for sharing work anecdotes, funny stories about clients or little office dramas, vanished, replaced by a growing silence that hung between them. Ryan tried to dismiss his concerns, attributing her behavior to stress. But the distance between them grew more apparent. Emily began coming home later and later, her once lively demeanor now replaced by a tense, exhausted presence. She would often head straight to the shower and then collapse into bed, barely saying goodnight. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, Emily let out a heavy sigh. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she admitted. "It's like no matter how hard we work, it's never good enough for Stark. He's impossible to please." "Maybe it's time to consider other options," Ryan suggested gently. "You don't need to stay somewhere that makes you miserable." Emily nodded, though her gaze remained distant. "Ava and I have talked about it," she said, her voice laced with hesitation. "But it's not that simple. I've put so much into this job." Ryan reached out, taking her hand in his. "Your happiness and well-being are more important than any job. We'll figure it out together." His words seemed to comfort her, but the tension lingered. Emily's dissatisfaction with work seeped into their home life, creating a rift that Ryan struggled to bridge. Meanwhile, Emily and Ava continued to navigate their hostile work environment, growing closer in their shared frustrations. Late-night brainstorming sessions about escape plans became their new norm. Then one day Emily came home with a surprising announcement. "Ava and I have decided to quit," she declared, a mix of relief and apprehension in her voice. "We can't keep living like this. It's not worth it." Ryan supported her decision wholeheartedly. "I'm proud of you," he said. "No job is worth sacrificing your mental health." But what Emily didn't mention, what she couldn't bring herself to say, was that Ava had already lined up a new position at a prestigious firm. And Ava, ever resourceful, had a plan to help Emily get a foot in the door as well. It involved networking, connections, and a little bit of charm, something Ava was particularly skilled at. Over the next few days, Emily grew more secretive about her plans. She explained that Ava had arranged a meeting with someone influential at her new company, a man who could potentially help Emily secure a position. But there was a catch. The meeting wouldn't take place in an office or even a coffee shop. Ava insisted it would be more effective to host the meeting at home, a relaxed, personal setting that would make a stronger impression. When Emily brought this up to Ryan, he hesitated. "Why not a restaurant?" he suggested. "It's neutral and it doesn't blur any lines." Emily shook her head. "Ava says it's better this way. It shows hospitality, trust. It's how things work in her field." Reluctantly, Ryan agreed, though unease gnawed at him. Hosting strangers in their home for something as significant as a job opportunity felt off. But he trusted Emily's judgment and decided to go along with it. As the day of the meeting approached, Ryan noticed a shift in Emily. She seemed more focused, more determined, but also more distant. Late-night phone calls with Ava, long hours spent preparing for the meeting, and a renewed emphasis on her appearance all added to Ryan's growing unease. He told himself he was overthinking it. Emily was ambitious, driven. This was just her way of seizing an opportunity. But deep down he couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing, something that threatened to upend the life they had built together. The new boss, Mr. Stark, had arrived with a reputation for being a perfectionist, but it quickly became evident that his leadership style was more micromanagement than mastery. He demanded detailed updates on even the smallest tasks, conducted hours-long meetings dissecting productivity charts, and issued new nearly impossible deadlines every week. The once collaborative environment in Emily's office turned hostile, with employees rushing to meet Stark's ever-changing expectations and burning out in the process. Emily would often come home with frustration etched on her face. "It's like nothing we do is good enough for him," she vented to Ryan one evening. "No matter how much we push ourselves, he always finds something to criticize." Ryan tried to comfort her. "That sounds unbearable. Maybe it's time to consider leaving?" At first, Emily dismissed the idea. "It's just a rough patch," she said. "Things might get better once we get used to his style." But things didn't get better. They got worse. Stark's unrealistic demands led to plummeting morale, and Emily's once lively friend Ava, a bright, optimistic presence in the office, started showing signs of wear as well. Over dinner one night, Emily confided, "Even Ava is thinking about quitting. She's been with the company longer than I have, and she's never been this discouraged." Ryan nodded. "Maybe it's a sign. If someone as positive as Ava feels that way, it's not just you. This might be the time to make a change." Emily seemed to take his words to heart. The long nights, constant stress, and growing dissatisfaction took their toll. One evening she came home with a resolute look. "Ava and I have decided to quit," she announced. "We've been talking about it for weeks and we both agree, this isn't worth it anymore." Ryan supported her decision wholeheartedly. "I think that's the right move. No job is worth your mental health." But Ava's plan didn't end with simply quitting. She had already landed a position at a new company, a place she described as more dynamic, innovative, and rewarding. She quickly became a beacon of inspiration for Emily, encouraging her to explore similar opportunities. "Ava says there's someone at her new job who might be able to help me," Emily explained a few days later. "She's already talked to him and he's interested in meeting me." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "That's great. So what's the plan? A coffee meeting or something at their office?" Emily hesitated before replying. "Actually, Ava suggested hosting a dinner at our place. She says it's better to keep things informal, less intimidating and more personal. Apparently it's how she got her job." Ryan frowned. "At home? That feels a bit unorthodox. Why not a restaurant? It's still casual but doesn't blur any lines." Emily shook her head. "Ava insists this is how things are done. She's been incredibly successful, so I trust her judgment." Reluctantly, Ryan agreed, though the idea didn't sit well with him. Hosting strangers in their home for such a critical opportunity felt invasive. Still, he wanted to support Emily, so he set aside his reservations and helped her plan the dinner. As the evening approached, Emily threw herself into preparations. She spent hours coordinating the menu with Ryan, choosing a sophisticated yet approachable outfit, and ensuring every detail of their home was perfect. Ryan watched as she worked tirelessly, noticing a determination that bordered on obsession. On the night of the dinner, Ava arrived first, as impeccably dressed and confident as ever. She greeted Ryan warmly before helping Emily with last-minute touches. Shortly after, a sleek car pulled up in front of their house and Ava's colleague, who introduced himself as Daniel, stepped out. Daniel was charming, with an air of casual confidence that immediately filled the room. He complimented their home, praised the food, and seemed genuinely interested in Emily's experience and skills. Ryan couldn't help but notice, however, that Daniel's attention lingered on Emily a little too often. His compliments felt overly personal, and he seemed to direct most of his conversation toward her. Despite his unease, Ryan remained polite, redirecting the conversation when it veered too far into flattery. Emily, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to Daniel's subtle attentions. She was focused on impressing him professionally, answering his questions about her career and aspirations with enthusiasm. As the dinner progressed, Ryan's unease deepened. At one point, Daniel mentioned the unique opportunities available at Ava's new company, but when Ryan pressed for details, his answers were vague. "It's all about how you present yourself," Daniel said cryptically. "First impressions are everything." Later that evening, after their guests had left, Ryan expressed his concerns. Something about Daniel felt off, he said cautiously. I think you should be careful about how much you trust him. Emily brushed off his worries. He's just confident, Ryan. Ava trusts him and he's been nothing but professional. Ryan nodded, though his apprehension remained. Something about the evening didn't feel right, but he didn't want to seem overbearing. He decided to keep his thoughts to himself, hoping his concerns were unfounded. In the days that followed, Emily grew increasingly preoccupied with her next steps. Late-night phone calls with Ava became more frequent, and Emily's focus on her appearance intensified. Ryan chalked it up to her desire to make a strong impression in her new field, but the growing distance between them was hard to ignore. Emily's enthusiasm for her new connections was contagious, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. As she prepared for another informal meeting with Daniel and Ava, Ryan found himself wondering, was this just a step toward a brighter future, or was it the beginning of something much darker? The dinner that evening was, by most measures, a success. The house was impeccably arranged, the food was excellent, and Emily's energy was infectious as she engaged in conversation with Ava and Daniel. However, for Ryan, it was a night full of subtle yet troubling observations that he couldn't shake. From the moment Daniel arrived, Ryan noticed something off. He was charming, too charming. While he addressed both Ryan and Emily initially, his attention seemed to drift toward Emily with increasing frequency. His compliments, though polite on the surface, carried an undercurrent that felt too personal. Emily, your attention to detail is remarkable, he said at one point, gesturing to the perfectly set table. It's clear you're the kind of person who excels at everything you do. Ryan forced a smile, deflecting the comment. We both put in a lot of work for tonight. Of course, Daniel replied smoothly, though his gaze lingered on Emily a beat too long. As the evening progressed, Daniel's focus on Emily became more pronounced. He praised her career achievements, inquired about her aspirations, and even made a point to compliment her necklace, something Ryan found particularly odd. It's stunning, Daniel said with a smile. It suits you perfectly. Emily appeared flattered, but Ryan couldn't shake the discomfort growing in his gut. When Daniel casually mentioned the unique culture at Ava's new company, Ryan seized the opportunity to probe. You've mentioned how things work there a few times now, Ryan said, his tone measured. What exactly makes it so unique? Daniel's smile remained intact, though his response was vague. It's about connections and presentation, he said. We value people who know how to stand out and make an impression. Something about his answer felt rehearsed, evasive. Ryan pressed further. Sounds intriguing. What kind of opportunities are we talking about? Daniel's smile widened. The kind that reward boldness, he said cryptically. Emily's already a natural fit. The conversation moved on, but Ryan couldn't let go of the unease settling over him. After the guests left, he shared his concerns with Emily. Daniel seemed overly interested in you, he said, keeping his tone neutral. Emily laughed. He's just impressed by my work, she said. Ava trusts him completely and so do I. Ryan nodded, though her response did little to ease his mind. The night had left him with more questions than answers, and he resolved to pay closer attention moving forward. Over the next few weeks, Emily's life seemed to transform almost overnight. She officially joined Ava's company, and her initial enthusiasm was undeniable. The team is amazing, she gushed after her first day. It's a completely different environment, so supportive and dynamic. Ryan was happy for her but couldn't ignore the changes that accompanied her new job. Emily began putting more effort into her appearance, choosing outfits that were far more polished and revealing than her usual style. It's part of the company culture, she explained when Ryan asked. Everyone dresses to impress. Her work schedule also became increasingly erratic. Late-night events and after-work meetups with colleagues became the norm. Emily insisted these gatherings were critical for networking. They're informal, she said. But they're where a lot of decisions happen. Ryan tried to be supportive, but the growing frequency of these events unsettled him. Do you really need to attend every single one? He asked one evening as Emily prepared for yet another after-work party. She sighed, clearly frustrated. You don't understand how this works, Ryan. These events are important for building relationships. I just think it's unusual, he said carefully. You've only been there a few weeks and it already feels excessive. Emily brushed off his concerns. It's part of the job, she said, her tone sharp. I'm not doing anything wrong. Despite her assurances, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The late nights, the cryptic explanations, the constant attention to her appearance, it all felt out of character for Emily. He began to notice other changes too. She was more secretive with her phone, often stepping away to take calls or replying to messages with a sly smile she didn't bother to explain. One night, she came home late, her steps unsteady and her words slurred. "The party was amazing," she said, dropping her bag carelessly on the floor. "Everyone's so welcoming." Ryan's unease deepened. "How late did it go?" he asked, keeping his voice even. Emily shrugged. "I didn't check the time. It's not a big deal." Her dismissive attitude only fueled Ryan's suspicions. He began paying closer attention, watching for any inconsistencies in her stories. It wasn't long before he started noticing small cracks, unexplained absences, vague excuses, and an unusual level of enthusiasm for her new workplace. Then came the day Emily announced her first promotion. "Can you believe it?" she said, her face glowing with excitement. "I tweaked one of my reports just like Ava suggested and it got noticed right away. They're moving me up already?" Ryan forced a smile. "That's great news," he said, though his mind raced with questions. Promotions didn't usually happen this quickly, especially not after just a few weeks. Something about it felt too good to be true. Emily's rise continued at a dizzying pace, with each new success accompanied by more late nights and unexplained outings. Ryan began to feel like an outsider in his own home, watching as Emily's world became increasingly distant from his own. One evening, as Emily prepared for yet another corporate event, Ryan voiced his concerns directly. "Are you sure this is all above board?" he asked. "The rapid promotions, the constant events, it doesn't feel normal." Emily turned to him, her expression a mix of irritation and disbelief. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" she snapped. "I'm finally getting ahead and all you do is question everything." Her defensiveness only deepened Ryan's unease. He decided to let it go for the moment but made a mental note to dig deeper. The Emily he knew, the one he had built a life with, was slipping away and he needed to understand why. It was a late Friday night when Ryan sat alone in the living room, scrolling aimlessly on his phone. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards as the wind rattled the windows. Emily had gone to yet another company event, this one billed as a casual gathering to celebrate the team's latest success. She hadn't given many details, brushing it off as just another work thing, but Ryan couldn't shake the knot of unease growing in his stomach. Hours passed and the clock ticked past midnight. Ryan sent Emily a quick text. "Are you okay? When will you be home?" The message remained unread. He called her phone twice but it went straight to voicemail. The knot in his stomach tightened as worry morphed into suspicion. He sat by the window, glancing outside every few minutes until finally, he heard the sound of tires crunching against the driveway gravel. Emily stumbled through the front door, giggling softly, her makeup smeared and her hair disheveled. She wore a short dress that clung to her in a way that felt oddly out of place for a casual gathering. But what struck Ryan most was the streaks of a white, sticky substance clinging to her dress and arms. She smelled faintly of alcohol and her steps were unsteady. Ryan's heart sank. "Emily, what happened?" he asked, his voice strained. She waved him off with a lazy smile, swaying as she kicked off her heels. "Relax, it was just a party," she slurred. "Everyone got a little wild." "What is that on your dress?" Ryan pressed, his tone sharper. Emily glanced down at herself, blinking as if noticing the mess for the first time. "Oh, it's nothing. Someone spilled a drink on me. No big deal." Her excuse was flimsy and Ryan knew it. His mind raced, connecting dots he hadn't wanted to connect. He stood frozen as Emily stumbled toward the bedroom, collapsing onto the bed without another word. Within minutes she was out cold, her soft snores filling the otherwise silent room. Ryan stood at the doorway, staring at her sleeping form. A flood of conflicting emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion, coursed through him. He didn't want to believe the worst, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. Determined to find answers, he walked to her side of the bed and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. Unlocking her phone was easy, her passcode hadn't changed. As the screen lit up, his stomach churned with dread. He opened her messaging app and was immediately met with a stream of explicit conversations that confirmed his worst fears. The first thread was with her boss, Daniel. Tonight was unforgettable, one message read, followed by a string of emojis Ryan didn't want to decipher. "You looked stunning in that dress," another message from Daniel read. Ryan scrolled further, his breath catching as he read more. The messages grew increasingly explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Ryan's hands trembled as he tapped into another conversation, this one with Ava. "You're playing the game perfectly, Ava had written. "Daniel is completely hooked. Keep this up and you'll be running the place in no time. Emily's replies were equally damning. It's all about charm, she had written. If this is what it takes to get ahead, so be it. Ryan scrolled further, uncovering a group chat with several of Emily's colleagues. The tone of the messages was vulgar, filled with crude jokes and comments about the power dynamics within the office. One message in particular made his blood run cold. The boss loves a good afterparty, if you know what I mean. Emily's got him wrapped around her finger. Ryan felt sick. The person described in these messages wasn't the woman he thought he knew. It wasn't the Emily he had supported through every step of her career. This was someone else, someone willing to cross any boundary for success. He continued searching through her phone, finding photos taken at the event that night. Most were innocuous group shots, but a few stood out. There was one of Emily leaning close to Daniel, their faces just inches apart, his hand resting on her waist. Another photo showed her in a private room, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by a small group of men, including Daniel, who appeared far too comfortable in her presence. Each discovery felt like a punch to the gut. Ryan's world shattered as the evidence piled up, leaving no room for doubt. He took screenshots of everything, carefully saving them to his own device. He needed to preserve the truth, not just for his own clarity but for whatever steps came next. As he sat in the dark, staring at the damning messages and photos, Ryan's emotions began to shift. The initial wave of devastation gave way to anger, a deep, simmering rage at the betrayal he'd uncovered. He had given Emily everything, his love, his trust, his unwavering support. And this was how she repaid him? He looked back toward the bedroom where Emily lay unconscious, blissfully unaware of the storm she had unleashed. Ryan's jaw tightened as he made a decision. He wouldn't confront her yet, not until he had a plan. This wasn't just about their marriage anymore. This was about exposing the toxic environment she and her colleagues had cultivated. If Emily thought she could lie her way through this, she was sorely mistaken. Ryan spent the rest of the night gathering more evidence. He searched through Emily's email, finding additional incriminating exchanges. One thread detailed a special condition required for her rapid promotion, phrased in such vague terms that it could have been easily overlooked by someone less suspicious. But Ryan now understood exactly what it meant. By dawn, Ryan had everything he needed. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, it was a cold, hard reality. His wife had not only betrayed their marriage but also compromised her integrity for professional gain. The woman he had loved and supported was gone, replaced by someone he no longer recognized. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the curtains, Ryan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the screenshots on his phone. His mind was made up. This wasn't just a matter of confronting Emily. It was time to expose the lies, the corruption, and the betrayal that had upended his life. He glanced toward the bedroom once more, his heart heavy but resolute. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew one thing for certain. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Ryan sat at the kitchen table, his phone buzzing with screenshots, photos, and incriminating messages, all carefully cataloged into a folder labeled evidence. His emotions, still raw from the betrayal, now fueled a cold determination. Emily had chosen her path, and Ryan decided it was time for her, and her toxic workplace, to face the consequences. The first step in Ryan's plan was to identify someone within Emily's company who could help bring this corruption to light. Among the many messages on her phone, one name stood out: Victor. Victor, as Emily had described in passing, was a long-standing employee with a reputation for integrity. He had openly criticized the shortcuts and questionable ethics that had seemingly become the norm under Daniel's leadership. If anyone would be willing to take a stand, it was him. Ryan found Victor's email address in the company directory, an easy task, thanks to their public-facing website. He composed a concise but detailed message, attaching the most damning evidence he had gathered. Subject: Urgent, evidence of corruption within your company. Dear Victor, I'm reaching out because I believe you are someone who values integrity and fairness. I've come across evidence that points to serious misconduct involving members of your company, including unethical behavior, misuse of power, and a toxic culture that prioritizes exploitation over merit. Attached are screenshots and messages that clearly detail these actions, including those of your management team. I believe this evidence could help you take the necessary steps to expose these wrongdoings. Please let me know if you're willing to collaborate. Regards, Ryan. Ryan hit send and waited. Within an hour, a reply came through. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I've suspected something like this for a while but lacked the proof to act. Your evidence is exactly what I need. Let's escalate this to the appropriate channels, both internally and externally. I'll be in touch soon. The message was short, but it carried a tone of quiet determination. Ryan felt a flicker of satisfaction. His plan was already in motion. Victor worked quickly. Over the next few days, he compiled a comprehensive report using Ryan's evidence, adding his own observations and complaints from other employees who had voiced similar concerns. Together, they built an airtight case, ensuring every detail was documented. Victor presented the report to the company's upper management, bypassing Daniel and other implicated individuals. The evidence was irrefutable. Explicit messages, photos, and accounts of unethical behavior painted a damning picture of the workplace culture. The response from upper management was swift. Within days, an internal investigation was launched. Those involved in the misconduct, including Daniel, were immediately suspended pending further inquiry. Emily, as one of the key figures implicated in the scandal, was summoned to a meeting with the company's legal team. Ryan didn't stop at internal channels. He forwarded the same evidence to a well-known compliance agency specializing in corporate ethics violations. The agency, known for its no-tolerance approach to corruption, took immediate interest in the case. Ryan made it clear in his message that this was not just about personal betrayal, it was about exposing a culture of exploitation and abuse. The agency launched its own investigation, working alongside regulators to ensure the company faced accountability. Ryan knew that with external scrutiny, there was no way this would be swept under the rug. The fallout from the investigations was nothing short of catastrophic for Emily's company. Daniel was the first to go. His suspension quickly turned into termination as the investigation uncovered years of misconduct, from inappropriate relationships to manipulation of promotions. Emily, who had been a willing participant in these schemes, wasn't far behind. The company issued a public statement, acknowledging the findings and promising a complete overhaul of its workplace policies. But the damage was done. Media outlets caught wind of the scandal, and the company's reputation took a massive hit. Emily's disgrace was absolute. She was fired effective immediately, her name now synonymous with the scandal that had rocked the organization. Ava, too, faced consequences. Though her role was less direct, her complicity in enabling and encouraging unethical behavior didn't go unnoticed. She was quietly let go, her once bright career now tarnished. The day Emily received her termination notice, she stormed into the house, her face pale and tear-streaked. Ryan was waiting for her, sitting calmly at the kitchen table with a stack of garbage bags by the door, a silent but clear message. "They fired me," Emily spat, her voice shaking with fury. "They said I was part of some scandal. Did you have something to do with this?" Ryan didn't flinch. He met her gaze with a cold, unwavering stare. "I did what needed to be done," he said evenly. "You betrayed me, Emily. You betrayed us. And you destroyed your own career in the process." Emily's face twisted with anger and desperation. "You're jealous, aren't you? You couldn't handle me getting ahead, so you sabotaged me." Ryan leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with controlled anger. "You sabotaged yourself. I didn't make you cheat on me. I didn't make you compromise your integrity. You did that all on your own." Emily's defiance faltered, replaced by a flicker of shame. She glanced at the garbage bags, realizing their marriage was beyond saving. "You're throwing me out?" she whispered. Ryan nodded. "Your things are packed. You made your choices, and now it's time to face the consequences." Months after the scandal, the ripple effects were still being felt. The compliance agency's report revealed widespread issues beyond Emily's department, leading to additional terminations and a restructuring of the company's leadership. Ryan, meanwhile, found solace in knowing he had done the right thing. He hadn't just exposed Emily's betrayal, he had helped bring accountability to a toxic system that thrived on exploitation. As he rebuilt his life, Ryan reflected on the lessons he had learned. Betrayal, he realized, wasn't just about infidelity, it was about losing sight of one's values, of choosing ambition over honesty and integrity. And while he couldn't undo the pain Emily had caused, he could take pride in knowing he had stood up for what was right. The morning after Emily was fired, the house was eerily silent. Ryan sat in the kitchen, his phone in hand, reviewing the evidence he had meticulously gathered. The screenshots, messages, and photos felt heavier now, no longer just proof of betrayal but the remnants of a marriage that had unraveled beyond repair. Emily emerged from the bedroom, her face pale, her eyes red from a night of crying. She glanced at Ryan and paused as if weighing whether to speak. "I lost everything because of you," she said bitterly, breaking the silence. Ryan's jaw tightened. "You didn't lose it because of me, Emily. You lost it because of your choices? Emily scoffed, her tone sharp. You've been sabotaging me from the start. Always questioning, always doubting. You couldn't handle my success. Ryan rose from his seat, his calm exterior masking the storm within. You think this is about jealousy? You lied to me, cheated on me, and threw away everything we built for the sake of climbing a corporate ladder. And don't pretend you didn't know this was coming. He pulled out his phone, opening the folder filled with the damning evidence. You want to see why you lost everything? Here it is. He began scrolling through the messages and photos, holding the screen up for her to see. Emily's eyes widened as the full weight of the evidence hit her. The explicit messages with Daniel, the mocking group chats with colleagues, the photos from the parties, it was all laid bare. Her initial defiance crumbled into desperation. That's not what it looks like, she stammered. I didn't mean for it to. Don't, Ryan interrupted, his voice cold. Don't insult me by pretending there's some explanation that makes this okay. You knew exactly what you were doing. And now you're paying the price. Emily's desperation turned to anger. You're not perfect either. You never supported me the way I needed. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. Ryan stared at her, disbelief etched across his face. You weren't enough? Emily, I did everything for you. I supported you when you were miserable at your last job. I hosted that ridiculous dinner to help you network. I trusted you even when things didn't feel right. And this? He gestured to the phone in his hand. This is how you repay me? Emily fell silent, the weight of her actions finally sinking in. Her shoulders slumped and she sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. I don't know what I was thinking, she murmured. I got caught up in it all. Ryan's tone softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. It's too late for apologies, Emily. You made your choices. Now it's time for me to make mine. Ryan gestured toward the door, where several garbage bags filled with Emily's belongings were neatly stacked. Your things are packed. You need to leave. Emily looked up, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. You're kicking me out? After everything we've been through? Ryan nodded, his expression unyielding. I can't do this anymore. I can't live with someone who lied to me, betrayed me, and destroyed the trust we had. This is your mess, Emily. It's not my job to fix it. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped, realizing she had no defense. With a defeated sigh, she rose from the chair and began gathering her things. The silence between them was heavy as she carried the bags out to her car, each step marking the end of a chapter neither of them could salvage. As the front door closed behind her, Ryan felt an odd mix of relief and sorrow. The house was quieter than it had been in years, but for the first time, it felt like a place where he could start rebuilding. The days that followed were consumed by practical matters. Ryan wasted no time contacting a lawyer, determined to ensure that the divorce was swift and equitable, but most importantly that his assets were protected. He provided the evidence he had collected, which not only documented Emily's infidelity but also painted a clear picture of her unethical behavior at work. You're in a strong position, his lawyer assured him during their first meeting. Given the circumstances and the evidence you've gathered, we can push for a favorable settlement. Ryan nodded, feeling a sense of vindication. He didn't want revenge anymore. He just wanted to move forward without being dragged down by Emily's actions. The divorce process was grueling as expected, but the evidence left little room for dispute. Emily, faced with overwhelming proof of her wrongdoings, had no leverage. The court ruled in Ryan's favor, granting him sole ownership of their home and protecting his savings. Emily was left with little more than her personal belongings and the burden of starting over. When the divorce was finalized, Ryan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The chapter of his life that had been defined by betrayal and heartbreak was finally closed. He threw himself into his work, his hobbies, and rebuilding his sense of stability. Months later, Ryan reflected on how far he had come. The scars from his marriage hadn't disappeared, but they had started to fade. He learned to trust himself again, to value his own worth, and to find peace in a life free from deception. As for Emily, the fallout from her actions followed her wherever she went. Word of the corporate scandal had spread, making it nearly impossible for her to secure a new job. Her reputation, once a source of pride, was now a mark of disgrace. Ryan didn't keep tabs on her life, he had no desire to. His focus was on his own journey, and he had no intention of looking back. The year following the divorce was transformative for Ryan. The house, once a shared space filled with tension and betrayal, had become a sanctuary of peace. The quiet mornings were now filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the occasional hum of a favorite playlist. Ryan had poured himself into hobbies, photography, hiking, and even cooking elaborate meals. He rediscovered parts of himself that had been neglected for years. His friends noticed the change. "You're glowing," Mark said during one of their weekly hikes. "It's like you've come back to life." "I guess I finally let go of the things that didn't serve me anymore," Ryan replied with a small smile. And it was true. The bitterness and anger that once consumed him had dissolved, replaced by a calm acceptance and a focus on rebuilding his life. One evening, as Ryan was prepping for an early morning photography trip, his phone rang. The name on the screen stopped him in his tracks. Emily. For a moment he considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won and he answered. "Ryan?" Emily's voice was softer than he remembered, almost fragile. "It's me." "I know," he said, his tone guarded. "What's going on?" I just wanted to talk." "To apologize," she said, her voice faltering. "I know I hurt you and I've been living with the consequences every day since." Ryan didn't respond, letting her continue. "I lost everything," she said, her voice cracking. "My job, my reputation. People won't even look at me the same. And I have a child now. A boy." The revelation hung heavy in the air. "A child?" Ryan asked, his voice steady but curious. "Yes. His name is Ethan," Emily said, her tone trembling. "He's just a few months old. I made a lot of mistakes, Ryan, but I'm trying to be better. For him." Ryan closed his eyes, processing the news. Part of him felt sympathy for her struggles, but the wounds of the past reminded him why they were no longer together. "So, why are you calling me?" he asked after a moment. "I was hoping, maybe we could try again," she said hesitantly. "I know I don't deserve it, but Ethan deserves a stable family. And we had so many good years together, Ryan. Maybe we could rebuild that?" Ryan's stomach turned. He thought of the betrayal, the lies, and the choices Emily had made. He had spent months piecing his life back together, finding himself again after the storm she had brought into his world. "Emily," he said carefully, "I appreciate that you're trying to make amends. But too much has happened. Trust isn't something you can just rebuild after it's been shattered." "I've changed," she pleaded. "I'm not the same person I was. Can't you see that?" "I'm glad you're trying to change for Ethan's sake," Ryan said firmly. "But I've moved on. I found my peace and I won't risk losing it again. I hope you find your happiness, Emily, but it's not with me." Silence stretched between them. When Emily spoke again, her voice was broken. "I understand. I'm sorry for everything, Ryan. Truly. I wish you the best," Ryan replied before ending the call. Looking forward. That night, Ryan sat on his back porch, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. He reflected on how far he had come, a year of rediscovering his strength and learning to value himself again. The pain Emily had caused was no longer an open wound but a distant memory. As the stars began to dot the sky, Ryan's phone buzzed with a message from a friend he'd met through a photography class. They were planning a weekend trip to capture sunrise shots at a national park. Smiling, Ryan replied with a simple, "Count me in." For Ryan, the past was behind him, a chapter closed with lessons learned. The future stretched ahead like an open road, filled with promise and possibilities. And this time he was ready to embrace it fully, free from the shadows of betrayal. What would you do if your past came knocking on your door? Would you forgive or would you choose to move forward? Let us know in the comments. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to Unheard Stories for more gripping tales of heartbreak, revenge, and redemption. See you in the next story.